Chapter 9. The GB being editors is not the best way to wealth. We all feel this now, and highwaymen are not respected anymore like they used to be. I am sure we had tried our best to restore our fallen fortunes. We felt their fall very much, because we knew the Bastables had been rich once. Dora and Oswald can remember when father was always bringing nice things home from London, and there used to be turkeys and geese and wine and cigars come by the carrier at Christmas time, and boxes of candied fruit and French plums in ornamental boxes with silk and velvet and gilding on them. They were called prunes, but the prunes you buy at the grocer's are quite different. But now there is seldom anything nice brought from London, and the turkey and the prune people have forgotten father's address. "How can we restore those beastly fallen fortunes?" said Oswald. "We've tried digging and writing and princesses and being editors." "And being bandits," said H.O. "When did you try that?" asked Dora quickly. "You know I told you it was wrong." "It wasn't wrong the way we did it," said Alice, quicker still, before Oswald could say, "Who asked you to tell us anything about it?" Which would have been rude, and he is glad he didn't. "We only caught Albert next door." "Oh, Albert next door," said Dora contemptuously, and I felt more comfortable, for even after I didn't say, "Who asked you?" etc., I was afraid Dora was going to come the good elder sister over us. She does that a jolly sight too often. Dickie looked up from the paper he was reading and said, "This sounds likely." And he read out, "L100 secures partnership in lucrative business for sale of useful patent. L10 weekly. No personal attendance necessary. Jobbins, 300, Old Street Road." "I wish we could secure that partnership," said Oswald. "He is 12, and a very thoughtful boy for his age." Alice looked up from her painting. She was trying to paint a fairy queen's frock with green bice, and it wouldn't rub. There is something funny about green bice. It never will rub off, no matter how expensive your paint box is, and even boiling water is very little use. She said, "Bother the bice." And Oswald, "It's no use thinking about that. Where are we to get £100? £10 a week is £5 to us," Oswald went on. He had done the sum in his head while Alice was talking, because partnership means halves. It would be A1 dot. Noel sat sucking his pencil. He had been writing poetry as usual. I saw the first 2 lines. "I wonder why green bice is never very nice." Suddenly he said, "I wish a fairy would come down the chimney and drop a jewel on the table, a jewel worth just £100. "She might as well give you the £100 while she was about it," said Dora. "Or while she was about it, she might as well give us £5 a week," said Alice. "Or 50, said I. "Or 500, said Dickie. I saw H.O. open his mouth, and I knew he was going to say, "Or 5,000, so I said, "Well, she won't give us 5p, but if you'd only do as I am always saying, and rescue a wealthy old gentleman from deadly peril, he would give us a pot of money, and we could have the partnership and £5 a week. £5 a week would buy a great many things." Then Dickie said, "Why shouldn't we borrow it?" So we said, "Who from?" And then he read this out of the paper. "Money privately without fees. The Bond Street Bank manager, Z. Rosenbaum. Advances cash from £20 to £10,000 on ladies' or gentlemen's note of hand alone, without security. No fees, no inquiries. Absolute privacy guaranteed." "What does it all mean?" asked H.O. "It means that there is a kind gentleman who has a lot of money, and he doesn't know enough poor people to help, so he puts it in the paper that he will help them by lending them his money. That's it, isn't it, Dickie?" Dora explained this, and Dickie said, "Yes." And H.O. said he was a generous benefactor, like in Miss Edgeworth. Then Noel wanted to know what a note of hand was, and Dickie knew that because he had read it in a book, and it was just a letter saying you will pay the money when you can, and signed with your name. "No inquiries," said Alice. "Oh, Dickie, do you think he would?" "Yes, I think so," said Dickie. "I wonder father doesn't go to this kind gentleman. I've seen his name before on a circular in father's study." "Perhaps he has," said Dora. But the rest of us were sure he hadn't, because, of course, if he had, There would have been more money to buy nice things. Just then, Pincher jumped up and knocked over the painting water. He is a very careless dog. I wonder why painting water is always such an ugly colour. Dora ran for a duster to wipe it up, and H.O. dropped drops of the water on his hands and said he had got the plague. So we played at the plague for a bit, and I was an Arab physician with a bath towel turban and cured the plague with magic acid drops. After that it was time for dinner, and after dinner we talked it all over and settled that we would go and see the generous benefactor the very next day. But we thought perhaps the GB, it is short for generous benefactor, would not like it if there were so many of us. I have often noticed that it is the worst of our being six. People think six a great many when it's children. That sentence looks wrong somehow. I mean, they don't mind 6 pairs of boots, or 6 pounds of apples, or 6 oranges, especially in equations, but they seem to think you ought not to have 5 brothers and sisters. Of course, Dickie was to go, because it was his idea. Dora had to go to Blackheath to see an old lady, a friend of father's, so she couldn't go. Alice said she ought to go, because it said, "Ladies and gentlemen," and perhaps the GB wouldn't let us have the money unless there were both kinds of us. H.O. said Alice wasn't a lady, and she said he wasn't going anyway. Then he called her a disagreeable cat, and she began to cry. But Oswald always tries to make up quarrels, so he said, "You're little sillies, both of you." And Dora said, "Don't cry, Alice. He only meant you weren't a grown-up lady." Then H.O. said, "What else did you think I meant, disagreeable?" So Dickie said, "Don't be disagreeable yourself, H.O. Let her alone and say you're sorry, or I'll jolly well make you." So H.O. said he was sorry. Then Alice kissed him and said she was sorry too. And after that, H.O. gave her a hug and said, "Now I'm really and truly sorry." So it was all right. Noel went the last time any of us went to London, so he was out of it, and Dora said she would take him to Blackheath if we'd take H.O. So as there'd been a little disagreeableness, we thought it was better to take him, and we did. At first we thought we'd tear our oldest things a bit more and put some patches of different colours on them to show the GB how much we wanted money. But Dora said that would be a sort of cheating, pretending we were poorer than we are. And Dora is right sometimes, though she is our elder sister. Then we thought we'd better wear our best things so that the GB might see we weren't so very poor that he couldn't trust us to pay his money back when we had it. But Dora said that would be wrong too. So it came to our being quite honest, as Dora said, and going just as we were without even washing our faces and hands. But when I looked at H.O. in the train, I wished we had not been quite so particularly honest. Everyone who reads this knows what it is like to go in the train, so I shall not tell about it, though it was rather fun, especially the part where the guard came for the tickets at Waterloo, and H.O. was under the seat and pretended to be a dog without a ticket. We went to Charing Cross, and we just went round to Whitehall to see the soldiers, and then by St. James's for the same reason, and when we'd looked in the shops a bit, we got to Brook Street, Bond Street. It was a brass plate on a door next to a shop, a very grand place where they sold bonnets and hats, all very bright and smart, and no tickets on them to tell you the price. We rang a bell, and a boy opened the door, and we asked for Mr. Rosenbaum. The boy was not polite, he did not ask us in. So then Dickie gave him his visiting card. It was one of father's, really, but the name is the same, Mr. Richard Bastable, and we others wrote our names underneath. I happened to have a piece of pink chalk in my pocket, and we wrote them with that. Then the boy shut the door in our faces, and we waited on the step. But presently he came down and asked our business. So Dickie said, "Money advanced, young shaver, and don't be all day about it." And then he made us wait again till I was quite stiff in my legs, but Alice liked it because of looking at the hats and bonnets, and at last the door opened, and the boy said, "Mr. Rosenbaum will see you." So we wiped our feet on the mat, which said so, and we went upstairs with soft carpets and into a room. It was a beautiful room. I wished then we had put on our best things, or at least washed a little, but it was too late now. The room had velvet curtains and a soft, soft carpet, and it was full of the most splendid things. Black and gold cabinets, and china, and statues, and pictures. There was a picture of a cabbage and a pheasant and a dead hare that was just like life, and I would have given worlds to have it for my own. The fur was so natural I should never have been tired of looking at it, but Alice liked the one of the girl with the broken jug best. Then besides the pictures there were clocks and candlesticks and vases and gilt looking-glasses and boxes of cigars and scent and things littered all over the chairs and tables. It was a wonderful place, and in the middle of all the splendor was a little old gentleman with a very long black coat and a very long white beard and a hooky nose like a falcon. And he put on a pair of gold spectacles and looked at us as if he knew exactly how much our clothes were worth. And then, while we elder ones were thinking how to begin, for we had all said good morning as we came in, of course, H.O. began before we could stop him. He said, "Are you the G.B.?" "The what?" said the little old gentleman. "The G.B.," said H. "Oh," and I winked at him to shut up, but he didn't see me, and the G.B. did. He waved his hand at me to shut up, so I had to, and H.O. went on. "It stands for Generous Benefactor." The old gentleman frowned. Then he said, "Your father sent you here, I suppose?" "No, he didn't," said Dickie. "Why did you think so?" The old gentleman held out the card, and I explained that we took that because father's name happens to be the same as Dickie's. "Doesn't he know you've come?" "No," said Alice. "We shan't tell him till we've got the partnership, because his own business worries him a good deal, and we don't want to bother him with ours till it's settled, and then we shall give him half our share." The old gentleman took off his spectacles and rumpled his hair with his hands. Then he said, "Then what did you come for?" "We saw your advertisement," Dickie said, "and we want £100 on our note of hand, and my sister came so that there should be both kinds of us, and we wanted to buy a partnership within the lucrative business for sale of useful patent, no personal attendance necessary." "I don't think I quite follow you," said the GB, "but one thing I should like settled before entering more fully into the matter. Why did you call me Generous Benefactor?" "Well, you see," said Alice, smiling at him to show she wasn't frightened, though I know really she was, awfully. "We thought it was so very kind of you to try to find out the poor people who want money and to help them and lend them your money." "Hum," said the GB, "sit down." He cleared the clocks and vases and candlesticks off some of the chairs, and we sat down. The chairs were velvety, with gilt legs. It was like a king's palace. "Now," he said, "you ought to be at school instead of thinking about money. Why aren't you?" We told him that we should go to school again when father could manage it, but meantime we wanted to do something to restore the fallen fortunes of the House of Bastable, and we said we thought the lucrative patent would be a very good thing. He asked a lot of questions, and we told him everything we didn't think father would mind our telling, and at last he said, "You wish to borrow money. When will you repay it?" "As soon as we've got it, of course," Dickie said. Then the GB said to Oswald, "You seem the eldest," but I explained to him that it was Dickie's idea, so my being eldest didn't matter. Then he said to Dickie, "You are a miner, I presume?" Dickie said he wasn't yet, but he had thought of being a mining engineer some day and going to Klondike. "Miner, not miner," said the GB. "I mean, you're not of age." "I shall be in 10 years, though," said Dickie. "Then you might repudiate the loan," said the GB, and Dickie said, "What?" Of course he ought to have said, "I beg your pardon. I didn't quite catch what you said." That is what Oswald would have said. It is more polite than what. "Repudiate the loan," the GB repeated. "I mean, you might say you would not pay me back the money, and the law could not compel you to do so." "Oh, well, if you think we're such sneaks," said Dickie, and he got up off his chair. But the GB said, sit down, I was only joking." Then he talked some more, and at last he said, "I don't advise you to enter into that partnership. It's a swindle. Many advertisements are, and I have not £100 by me today to lend you. But I will lend you £1, and you can spend it as you like, and when you are 21, you shall pay me back." "I shall pay you back long before that," said Dickie. "Thanks, awfully. And what about the note of hand?" "Oh," said the GB, "I'll trust to your honour. Between gentlemen, you know, and ladies, he made a beautiful bow to Alice. A word is as good as a bond. Then he took out a sovereign and held it in his hand while he talked to us. He gave us a lot of good advice about not going into business too young and about doing our lessons, just swatting a bit on our own hook, so as not to be put in a low form when we went back to school. And all the time he was stroking the sovereign and looking at it as if he thought it very beautiful. And so it was, for it was a new one. Then at last he held it out to Dickie, and when Dickie put out his hand for it, the GB suddenly put the sovereign back in his pocket. "No," he said, "I won't give you the sovereign. I'll give you 15 shillings and this nice bottle of scent. It's worth far more than the 5 shillings I'm charging you for it. And, when you can, you shall pay me back the pound, and 60% interest, 60%, 60%. "What's that?" said H.O. The GB said he'd tell us that when we paid back the sovereign, but 60% was nothing to be afraid of. He gave Dickie the money, and the boy was made to call a cab, and the GB put us in and shook hands with us all, and asked Alice to give him a kiss, so she did, and H.O. would do it too, though his face was dirtier than ever. The GB paid the cabman and told him what station to go to, and so we went home. That evening father had a letter by the 7 o'clock post, and when he had read it, he came up into the nursery. He did not look quite so unhappy as usual, but he looked grave. "You've been to Mr. Rosenbaum's," he said. So we told him all about it. It took a long time, and father sat in the armchair. It was jolly. He doesn't often come and talk to us now. He has to spend all his time thinking about his business. And when we'd told him all about it, he said, "You haven't done any harm this time, children. Rather good than harm, indeed. Mr. Rosenbaum has written me a very kind letter." "Is he a friend of yours, father?" Oswald asked. "He is an acquaintance," said my father, frowning a little. "We have done some business together. And this letter—" He stopped and then said, "No, you didn't do any harm today, but I want you for the future not to do anything so serious as to try to buy a partnership without consulting me, that's all. I don't want to interfere with your plays and pleasures, but you will consult me about business matters, won't you?" Of course we said we should be delighted, but then Alice, who was sitting on his knee, said, "We didn't like to bother you." Father said, "I haven't much time to be with you, for my business takes most of my time. It is an anxious business, but I can't bear to think of your being left all alone like this." He looked so sad we all said we liked being alone, and then he looked sadder than ever. Then Alice said, "We don't mean that exactly, father. It is rather lonely sometimes since mother died." Then we were all quiet a little while. Father stayed with us till we went to bed, and when he said good night, he looked quite cheerful. So we told him so, and he said, "Well, the fact is, that letter took a weight off my mind. I can't think what he meant, but I am sure the GB would be pleased if he could know he had taken a weight off somebody's mind. He is that sort of man, I think." We gave the cent to Dora. It is not quite such good scent as we thought it would be, but we had 15 shillings, and they were all good, so is the GB. And until those 15 shillings were spent, we felt almost as jolly as though our fortunes had been properly restored. You do not notice your general fortune so much, as long as you have money in your pocket. This is why so many children with regular pocket money have never felt it their duty to seek for treasure. So, perhaps, our not having pocket money was a blessing in disguise. But the disguise was quite impenetrable, like the villains in the books, and it seemed still more so when the 15 shillings were all spent. Then at last the others agreed to let Oswald try his way of seeking for treasure, but they were not at all keen about it, and many a boy less firm than Oswald would have chucked the whole thing. But Oswald knew that a hero must rely on himself alone, so he stuck to it, and presently the others saw their duty and backed him up. Chapter 10. Lord Tottenham. Oswald is a boy of firm and unswerving character, and he had never wavered from his first idea. He felt quite certain that the books were right, and that the best way to restore fallen fortunes was to rescue an old gentleman in distress. Then he brings you up as his own son. But if you preferred to go on being your own father's son, I expect the old gentleman would make it up to you some other way. In the books, the least thing does it. You put up the railway carriage window, or you pick up his purse when he drops it, or you say a hymn when he suddenly asks you to, and then your fortune is made. The others, as I said, were very slack about it, and did not seem to care much about trying the rescue. They said there wasn't any deadly peril, and we should have to make one before we could rescue the old gentleman from it, but Oswald didn't see that that mattered. However, he thought he would try some of the easier ways first, by himself. So he waited about the station, pulling up railway carriage windows for old gentlemen who looked likely, but nothing happened, and at last the porters said he was a nuisance. So that was no go. No one ever asked him to say a hymn, though he had learned a nice short one, beginning "New every morning." And when an old gentleman did drop a 2-shilling piece just by Ellis's the hairdresser's, and Oswald picked it up and was just thinking what he should say when he returned it, the old gentleman caught him by the collar and called him a young thief. It would have been very unpleasant for Oswald if he hadn't happened to be a very brave boy and knew the policeman on that beat very well indeed. So the policeman backed him up, and the old gentleman said he was sorry and offered Oswald sixpence. Oswald refused it with polite disdain, and nothing more happened at all. When Oswald had tried by himself and it had not come off, he said to the others, "We're wasting our time, not trying to rescue the old gentleman in deadly peril. Come, buck up, let's do something." It was dinner time, and Pincher was going round getting the bits off the plates. There were plenty because it was cold mutton day, and Alice said, "It's only fair to try Oswald's way. He has tried all the things the others thought of. Why couldn't we rescue Lord Tottenham?" Lord Tottenham is the old gentleman who walks over the heath every day in a paper collar at 3 o'clock, and when he gets halfway, if there is no one about, he changes his collar and throws the dirty one into the furze bushes. Dickie said, "Lord Tottenham's all right, but where's the deadly peril?" And we couldn't think of any. There are no highwaymen on Blackheath now, I am sorry to say, and though Oswald said half of us could be highwaymen and the other half rescue party, Dora kept on saying it would be wrong to be a highwayman, and so we had to give that up. Then Alice said, "What about Pincher?" And we all saw at once that it could be done. Pincher is very well bred, and he does know 1 or 2 things, though we never could teach him to beg. But if you tell him to hold on, he will do it, even if you only say, "Seize him," in a whisper. So we arranged it all. Dora said she wouldn't play. She said she thought it was wrong, and she knew it was silly. So we left her out, and she went and sat in the dining room with a goody book, so as to be able to say she didn't have anything to do with it if we got into a row over it. Alice and H.O. were to hide in the furze bushes just by where Lord Tottenham changes his collar, and they were to whisper, "Seize him," to Pincher. And then when Pincher had seized Lord Tottenham, we were to go and rescue him from his deadly peril, and he would say, "How can I reward you, my noble young preservers?" And it would be all right. So we went up to the heath. We were afraid of being late. Oswald told the others what procrastination was, so they got to the furze bushes a little after 2 o'clock, and it was rather cold. Alice and H.O. and Pincher hid, but Pincher did not like it any more than they did, and as we 3 walked up and down, we heard him whining, and Alice kept saying, "I am so cold. Isn't he coming yet?" And H.O. wanted to come out and jump about to warm himself. But we told him he must learn to be a Spartan boy, and that he ought to be very thankful he hadn't got a beastly fox eating his inside all the time. H.O. is our little brother, and we are not going to let it be our fault if he grows up a milksop. Besides, it was not really cold. It was his knees. He wears socks. So they stayed where they were. And at last, when even the other 3 who were walking about were beginning to feel rather chilly, we saw Lord Tottenham's big black cloak coming along, flapping in the wind like a great bird. So we said to Alice, "Hist! He approaches. You'll know when to set Pincher on by hearing Lord Tottenham talking to himself. He always does, while he is taking off his collar." Then we 3 walked slowly away, whistling to show we were not thinking of anything. Our lips were rather cold, but we managed to do it. Lord Tottenham came striding along, talking to himself. People call him the mad protectionist. I don't know what it means, but I don't think people ought to call a lord such names. As he passed us, he said, "Ruin of the country, sir. Fatal error, fatal error." And then we looked back and saw he was getting quite near where Pincher was, and Alice and H.O. We walked on, so that he shouldn't think we were looking, and in a minute we heard Pincher's bark, and then nothing for a bit. And then we looked round, and sure enough, good old Pincher had got Lord Tottenham by the trouser leg and was holding on like Billy-ho, so we started to run. Lord Tottenham had got his collar half off, it was sticking out sideways under his ear, and he was shouting, "Help! Help! Murder!" exactly as if someone had explained to him beforehand what he was to do. Pincher was growling and snarling and holding on. When we got to him, I stopped and said, "Dickie, we must rescue this good old man." Lord Tottenham roared in his fury, "Good old man be something or othered. Call the dog off." So Oswald said, "It is a dangerous task, but who would hesitate to do an act of true bravery?" And all the while Pincher was worrying and snarling, and Lord Tottenham shouting to us to get the dog away. He was dancing about in the road with Pincher hanging on like grim death, and his collar flapping about where it was undone. Then Noel said, "Haste, ere yet it be too late." So I said to Lord Tottenham, "Stand still, aged sir, and I will endeavour to alleviate your distress." He stood still, and I stooped down and caught hold of Pincher and whispered, "Drop it, sir, drop it." So then Pincher dropped it, and Lord Tottenham fastened his collar again. He never does change it if there's anyone looking, and he said, "I'm much obliged, I'm sure. Nasty, vicious brute. Here's something to drink my health." But Dickie explained that we are teetotalers and do not drink people's healths. So Lord Tottenham said, "Well, I'm much obliged anyway, and now I come to look at you. Of course, you're not young ruffians, but gentlemen's sons, eh? Still, you won't be above taking a tip from an old boy. I wasn't when I was your age." And he pulled out half a sovereign. It was very silly, but now we'd done it, I felt it would be beastly mean to take the old boy's chink after putting him in such a funk. He didn't say anything about bringing us up as his own sons, so I didn't know what to do. I let Pincher go, and was just going to say he was very welcome, and we'd rather not have the money, which seemed the best way out of it, when that beastly dog spoiled the whole show. Directly I let him go, he began to jump about at us and bark for joy, and try to lick our faces. He was so proud of what he'd done. Lord Tottenham opened his eyes, and he just said, "The dog seems to know you." And then Oswald saw it was all up, and he said, "Good morning," and tried to get away. But Lord Tottenham said, "Not so fast," and he caught Noel by the collar. Noel gave a howl, and Alice ran out from the bushes. Noel is her favourite. I'm sure I don't know why. Lord Tottenham looked at her and he said, "So there are more of you?" And then H.O. came out. "Do you complete the party?" Lord Tottenham asked him, and H.O. said there were only 5 of us this time. Lord Tottenham turned sharp off and began to walk away, holding Noel by the collar. We caught up with him and asked him where he was going, and he said, "To the police station." So then I said quite politely, "Well, don't take Noel. He's not strong, and he easily gets upset. Besides, it wasn't his doing. If you want to take anyone, take me. It was my very own idea." Dickie behaved very well. He said, "If you take Oswald, I'll go too. But don't take Noel. He's such a delicate little chap." Lord Tottenham stopped, and he said, "You should have thought of that before." Noel was howling all the time, and his face was very white, and Alice said, "Oh, do let Noel go, dear. Good, kind Lord Tottenham. He'll faint if you don't. I know he will. He does sometimes. Oh, I wish we'd never done it. Dora said it was wrong." "Dora displayed considerable common sense," said Lord Tottenham, and he let Noel go. And Alice put her arm round Noel and tried to cheer him up, but he was all trembly and as white as paper. Then Lord Tottenham said, "Will you give me your word of honour not to try to escape?" So we said we would. "Then follow me," he said, and led the way to a bench. We all followed, and Pincher too, with his tail between his legs. He knew something was wrong. Then Lord Tottenham sat down, and he made Oswald and Dickie and H.O. stand in front of him, but he let Alice and Noel sit down, and he said, "You set your dog on me, and you tried to make me believe you were saving me from it, and you would have taken my half-sovereign. Such conduct is most— No, you shall tell me what it is, sir, and speak the truth." So I had to say it was most ungentlemanly, but I said I hadn't been going to take the half-sovereign. "Then what did you do it for?" he asked. "The truth, mind." So I said, "I see now it was very silly, and Dora said it was wrong, but it didn't seem so till we did it. We wanted to restore the fallen fortunes of our house, and in the books if you rescue an old gentleman from deadly peril, he brings you up as his own son, or if you prefer to be your father's son, he starts you in business so that you end in wealthy affluence. And there wasn't any deadly peril, so we made Pincher into one, and so—" I was so ashamed I couldn't go on, for it did seem an awfully mean thing. Lord Tottenham said, "A very nice way to make your fortune, by deceit and trickery. I have a horror of dogs. If I'd been a weak man, the shock might have killed me. What do you think of yourselves, eh?" We were all crying except Oswald, and the others say he was, and Lord Tottenham went on. "Well, well, I see you're sorry. Let this be a lesson to you, and we'll say no more about it. I'm an old man now, but I was young once." Then Alice slid along the bench close to him and put her hand on his arm. Her fingers were pink through the holes in her woolly gloves, and said, "I think you're very good to forgive us, and we are really very, very sorry. But we wanted to be like the children in the books, only we never have the chances they have. Everything they do turns out all right, but we are sorry, very, very. And I know Oswald wasn't going to take the half-sovereign. Directly you said that about a tip from an old boy, I began to feel bad inside, and I whispered to H.O. that I wished we hadn't." Then Lord Tottenham stood up, and he looked like the death of Nelson, for he is clean-shaved and it is a good face, and he said, "Always remember never to do a dishonourable thing, for money or for anything else in the world." And we promised we would remember. Then he took off his hat, and we took off ours, and he went away, and we went home. I never felt so cheap in all my life. Dora said, "I told you so." But we didn't mind even that so much, though it was indeed hard to bear. It was what Lord Tottenham had said about ungentlemanly. We didn't go on to the heath for a week after that, but at last we all went, and we waited for him by the bench. When he came along, Alice said, "Please, Lord Tottenham, we have not been on the heath for a week, to be a punishment because you let us off, and we have brought you a present each if you will take them to show you are willing to make it up." He sat down on the bench, and we gave him our presents. Oswald gave him a sixpenny compass. He bought it with my own money on purpose to give him. Oswald always buys useful presents. The needle would not move after I'd had it a day or two, but Lord Tottenham used to be an admiral, so he will be able to make that go all right. Alice had made him a shaving case with a rose worked on it, and H.O. gave him his knife, the same one he once cut all the buttons off his best suit with. Dickie gave him his prize, Naval Heroes, because it was the best thing he had, and Noel gave him a piece of poetry he had made himself. "When sin and shame bow down the brow, then people feel just like we do now. We are so sorry with grief and pain, we never will be so ungentlemanly again." Lord Tottenham seemed very pleased. He thanked us and talked to us for a bit, and when he said goodbye, he said, "All's fair weather now, mates," and shook hands. And whenever we meet him, he nods to us, and if the girls are with us, he takes off his hat, so he can't really be going on thinking us ungentlemanly now. Chapter 11. Castilian Amoroso. One day, when we suddenly found that we had half a crown, we decided that we really ought to try Dickie's way of restoring our fallen fortunes while yet the deed was in our power, because it might easily have happened to us never to have half a crown again. So we decided to dally no longer with being journalists and bandits and things like them, but to send for sample and instructions how to earn £2 a week each in our spare time. We had seen the advertisement in the paper, and we had always wanted to do it, but we had never had the money to spare before somehow. The advertisement says, Any lady or gentleman can easily earn £2 a week in their spare time. Sample and instructions, 2 shillings, packed free from observation. A good deal of the half-crown was Dora's. It came from her godmother, but she said she would not mind letting Dickie have it if he would pay her back before Christmas and if we were sure it was right to try to make our fortune that way. Of course, that was quite easy, because out of £2 a week in your spare time, you can easily pay all your debts and have almost as much left as you began with. And as to the right, we told her to dry up. Dickie had always thought that this was really the best way to restore our fallen fortunes, and we were glad that now he had a chance of trying, because of course we wanted the £2 a week each. And besides, we were rather tired of Dickie's always saying, when our ways didn't turn out well, "Why don't you try the sample and instructions about our spare time?" When we found out about our half-crown, we got the paper. Noel was playing admirals in it, but he had made the cocked hat without tearing the paper, and we found the advertisement, and it said just the same as ever. So we got a 2 shilling postal order and a stamp, and what was left of the money it was agreed we would spend in ginger beer to drink success to trade. We got some nice paper out of Father's study, and Dickie wrote the letter, and we put in the money and put on the stamp and made H.O. post it. Then we drank the ginger beer, and then we waited for the sample and instructions. It seemed a long time coming, and the postman got quite tired of us running out and stopping him in the street to ask if it had come. But on the third morning it came. It was quite a large parcel, and it was packed, as the advertisement said it would be, free from observation. That means it was in a box, and inside the box was some stiff browny cardboard, crinkled like the galvanized iron on the tops of chicken houses, and inside that was a lot of paper, some of it printed and some scrappy, and in the very middle of it all a bottle, not very large, and black, and sealed on the top of the cork with yellow sealing wax. We looked at it as it lay on the nursery table, and while all the others grabbed at the papers to see what the printing said, Oswald went to look for the corkscrew so as to see what was inside the bottle. He found the corkscrew in the dresser drawer. It always gets there, though it is supposed to be in the sideboard drawer in the dining room, and when he got back, the others had read most of the printed papers. "I don't think it's much good, and I don't think it's quite nice to sell wine," Dora said. "And besides, it's not easy to suddenly begin to sell things when you aren't used to it." "I don't know," said Alice. "I believe I could." They all looked rather down in the mouth, though, and Oswald asked how you were to make your £2 a week. "Why, you've got to get people to taste that stuff in the bottle. It's sherry, Castilian Amoroso its name is, and then you get them to buy it, and then you write to the people and tell them the other people want the wine, and then for every dozen you sell, you get 2 shillings from the wine people, so if you sell 20 dozen a week, you get your £2. "I don't think we shall sell as much as that," said Dickie. "We might not the first week," Alice said, "but when people found out how nice it was, they would want more and more, and if we only got 10 shillings a week, it would be something to begin with, wouldn't it?" Oswald said he should jolly well think it would, and then Dickie took the cork out with the corkscrew. The cork broke a good deal, and some of the bits went into the bottle. Dora got the medicine glass that has the teaspoons and tablespoons marked on it, and we agreed to have a teaspoonful each to see what it was like. "No one must have more than that," Dora said, "however nice it is." Dora behaved rather as if it were her bottle. I suppose it was, because she had lent the money for it. Then she measured out the teaspoonful, and she had first go because of being the eldest. We asked at once what it was like, but Dora could not speak just then. Then she said, "It's like the tonic Noel had in the spring, but perhaps sherry ought to be like that." Then it was Oswald's turn. He thought it was very burny, but he said nothing. He wanted to see first what the others would say. Dickie said his was simply beastly, and Alice said Noel could taste next if he liked. Noel said it was the golden wine of the gods, but he had to put his handkerchief up to his mouth all the same, and I saw the face he made. Then H.O. had his, and he spat it out in the fire, which was very rude and nasty, and we told him so. Then it was Alice's turn. She said, "Only half a teaspoonful for me, Dora. We mustn't use it all up." And she tasted it and said nothing. Then Dickie said, Look here, I chuck this. I'm not going to hawk round such beastly stuff. Anyone who likes can have the bottle. Quiz. And Alice got out ego before the rest of us. Then she said, I know what's the matter with it. It wants sugar. And at once we all saw that that was all there was the matter with the stuff. So we got 2 lumps of sugar and crushed it on the floor with one of the big wooden bricks till it was powdery, and mixed it with some of the wine up to the tablespoon mark, and it was quite different and not nearly so nasty. You see, it's all right when you get used to it, Dickie said. I think he was sorry he had said quiz in such a hurry. Of course, Alice said. It's rather dusty. We must crush the sugar carefully in clean paper before we put it in the bottle. Dora said she was afraid it would be cheating to make one bottle nicer than what people would get when they ordered a dozen bottles, but Alice said Dora always made a fuss about everything, and really it would be quite honest. You see, she said, I shall just tell them, quite truthfully, what we have done to it, and when their dozens come, they can do it for themselves. So then we crushed 8 more lumps, very cleanly and carefully between newspapers, and shook it up well in the bottle, and corked it up with a screw of paper, brown and not news, for fear of the poisonous printing ink getting wet and dripping down into the wine and killing people. We made Pincher have a taste, and he sneezed for ever so long, and after that he used to go under the sofa whenever we showed him the bottle. Then we asked Alice who she would try and sell it to. She said, I shall ask everybody who comes to the house, and while we are doing that, we can be thinking of outside people to take it to. We must be careful. There's not much more than half of it left, even counting the sugar. We did not wish to tell Eliza. I don't know why. And she opened the door very quickly that day, so that the taxis and a man who came to our house by mistake for next door got away before Alice had a chance to try them with the Castilian Amoroso. But about 5, Eliza slipped out for half an hour to see a friend who was making her a hat for Sunday, and while she was gone, there was a knock. Alice went, and we looked over the banisters. When she opened the door, she said at once, Will you walk in, please? The person at the door said, I called to see your pa, miss. Is he at home? Alice said again, Will you walk in, please? Then the person, it sounded like a man, said, He is in then. But Alice only kept on saying, Will you walk in, please? So at last the man did, rubbing his boots very loudly on the mat. Then Alice shut the front door, and we saw that it was the butcher, with an envelope in his hand. He was not dressed in blue, like when he is cutting up the sheep and things in the shop, and he wore knickerbockers. Alice says he came on a bicycle. She led the way into the dining room, where the Castilian Amoroso bottle and the medicine glass were standing on the table all ready. The others stayed on the stairs, but Oswald crept down and looked through the door crack. Please sit down, said Alice quite calmly, though she told me afterwards I had no idea how silly she felt. And the butcher sat down. Then Alice stood quite still and said nothing, but she fiddled with the medicine glass and put the screw of brown paper straight in the Castilian bottle. Will you tell your pa I'd like a word with him? The butcher said when he got tired of saying nothing. He'll be in very soon, I think, Alice said. And then she stood still again and said nothing. It was beginning to look very idiotic of her, and H.O. laughed. I went back and cuffed him for it quite quietly, and I don't think the butcher heard. But Alice did, and it roused her from her stupor. She spoke suddenly, very fast indeed, so fast that I knew she had made up what she was going to say before. She had got most of it out of the circular. She said, I want to call your attention to a sample of sherry wine I have here. It is called Castilian something or other, and at the price it is unequalled for flavour and bouquet. The butcher said, Well, I never. And Alice went on, Would you like to taste it? Thank you very much. I'm sure, miss, said the butcher. Alice poured some out. The butcher tasted a very little. He licked his lips, and we thought he was going to say how good it was. But he did not. He put down the medicine glass with nearly all the stuff left in it. We put it back in the bottle afterwards to save waste, and said, Excuse me, miss, but isn't it a little sweet? For sherry, I mean. The real isn't, said Alice. If you order a dozen, it will come quite different to that. We like it best with sugar. I wish you would order some. The butcher asked why. Alice did not speak for a minute, and then she said, I don't mind telling you. You are in business yourself, aren't you? We are trying to get people to buy it because we shall have 2 shillings for every dozen we can make anyone buy. It's called a per something. A percentage. Yes, I see, said the butcher, looking at the hole in the carpet. You see, there are reasons, Alice went on, why we want to make our fortunes as quickly as we can. Quite so, said the butcher, and he looked at the place where the paper is coming off the wall. And this seems a good way, Alice went on. We paid 2 shillings for the sample and instructions, and it says you can make £2 a week easily in your leisure time. I'm sure I hope you may, miss, said the butcher. And Alice said again, would he buy some? Sherry is my favourite wine, he said. Alice asked him to have some more to drink. No, thank you, miss, he said. It's my favourite wine, but it doesn't agree with me. Not the least bit. But I've an uncle drinks it. Suppose I ordered him 6 for a Christmas present. Well, miss, here's the shilling commission, anyway. And he pulled out a handful of money and gave her the shilling. But I thought the wine people paid that, Alice said. But the butcher said not on half-dozens they didn't. Then he said he didn't think he'd wait any longer for father. But would Alice ask father to write him? Alice offered him the sherry again, but he said something about not for worlds. And then she let him out and came back to us with the shilling and said, how's that? And we said, a 1. And all the evening we talked of our fortune that we had begun to make. Nobody came next day, but the day after a lady came to ask for money to build an orphanage for the children of dead sailors, and we saw her. I went in with Alice, and when we had explained to her that we had only a shilling and we wanted it for something else, Alice suddenly said, would you like some wine? And the lady said, thank you very much, but she looked surprised. She was not a young lady, and she had a mantle with beads, and the beads had come off in places, leaving a browny braid showing, and she had printed papers about the dead sailors in a sealskin bag, and the seal had come off in places, leaving the skin bare. We gave her a tablespoonful of the wine in a proper wineglass out of the sideboard because she was a lady, and when she had tasted it, she got up in a very great hurry and shook out her dress and snapped her bag shut and said, you naughty, wicked children, what do you mean by playing a trick like this? You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. I shall write to your mamma about it. You dreadful little girl, you might have poisoned me. But your mamma. Then Alice said, I'm very sorry. The butcher liked it, only he said it was sweet. And please don't write to mother. It makes father so unhappy when letters come for her. And Alice was very near crying. What do you mean, you silly child? Said the lady, looking quite bright and interested. Why doesn't your father like your mother to have letters, eh? And Alice said, oh, you, and began to cry and bolted out of the room. Then I said, our mother is dead, and will you please go away now? The lady looked at me a minute, and then she looked quite different, and she said, I'm very sorry. I didn't know. Never mind about the wine. I dare say your little sister meant it kindly. And she looked round the room just like the butcher had done. Then she said again, I didn't know. I'm very sorry. So I said, don't mention it, and shook hands with her and let her out. Of course, we couldn't have asked her to buy the wine after what she'd said, but I think she was not a bad sort of person. I do like a person to say they're sorry when they ought to be, especially a grown-up. They do it so seldom. I suppose that's why we think so much of it. But Alice and I didn't feel jolly for ever so long afterwards. And when I went back into the dining room, I saw how different it was from when Mother was here. And we are different, and Father is different, and nothing is like it was. I am glad I am not made to think about it every day. I went and found Alice, and told her what the lady had said, and when she had finished crying, we put away the bottle and said we would not try to sell any more to people who came. And we did not tell the others, we only said the lady did not buy any. But we went up on the heath, and some soldiers went by, and there was a Punch and Judy show, and when we came back we were better. The bottle got quite dusty where we had put it, and perhaps the dust of ages would have laid thick and heavy on it. Only a clergyman called when we were all out. He was not our own clergyman. Mr. Bristow is our own clergyman, and we all love him, and we would not try to sell sherry to people we like and make £2 a week out of them in our spare time. It was another clergyman, just a stray one, and he asked Eliza if the dear children would not like to come to his little Sunday school. We always spend Sunday afternoons with Father, but as he had left the name of his vicarage with Eliza and asked her to tell us to come, we thought we would go and call on him, just to explain about Sunday afternoons, and we thought we might as well take the sherry with us. "I won't go unless you all go too," Alice said, "and I won't do the talking." Dora said she thought we had much better not go, but we said, "Rot!" and it ended in her coming with us, and I am glad she did. Oswald said he would do the talking if the others liked, and he learned up what to say from the printed papers. We went to the vicarage early on Saturday afternoon and rang at the bell. It is a new red house with no trees in the garden, only very yellow mould and gravel. It was all very neat and dry. Just before we rang the bell, we heard someone inside call, "Jane, Jane," and we thought we would not be Jane for anything. It was the sound of the voice that called that made us sorry for her. The door was opened by a very neat servant in black with a white apron. We saw her tying the strings as she came along the hall through the different-coloured glass in the door. Her face was red, and I think she was Jane. We asked if we could see Mr. Mallow. The servant said Mr. Mallow was very busy with his sermon just then, but she would see. But Oswald said, "It's all right. He asked us to come." So she let us all in and shut the front door and showed us into a very tidy room with a bookcase full of a lot of books covered in black cotton with white labels and some dull pictures, and a harmonium. And Mr. Mallow was writing at a desk with drawers, copying something out of a book. He was stout and short and wore spectacles. He covered his writing up when we went in. I didn't know why. He looked rather cross, and we heard Jane or somebody being scolded outside by the voice. I hope it wasn't for letting us in, but I have had doubts. "Well," said the clergyman, "what is all this about?" "You asked us to call," Dora said, "about your little Sunday school. We are the Bastables of Lewisham Road." Yes," he said. "And shall I expect you all tomorrow?" He took up his pen and fiddled with it, and he did not ask us to sit down, but some of us did. "We always spend Sunday afternoon with Father," said Dora, "but we wish to thank you for being so kind as to ask us." "And we wish to ask you something else," said Oswald, and he made a sign to Alice to get the sherry ready in the glass. She did, behind Oswald's back while he was speaking. "My time is limited," said Mr. Mallow, looking at his watch, "but still—" Then he muttered something about the fold and went on. "Tell me what is troubling you, my little man, and I will try to give you any help in my power. What is it you want?" Then Oswald quickly took the glass from Alice and held it out to him and said, "I want your opinion on that." "On that?" he said. "What is it?" "It is a shipment," Oswald said, "but it's quite enough for you to taste." Alice had filled the glass half full. I suppose she was too excited to measure properly. "A shipment?" said the clergyman, taking the glass in his hand. "Yes," Oswald went on, "an exceptional opportunity, full-bodied and nutty. It really does taste rather like one kind of Brazil nut." Alice put her oar in as usual. The vicar looked from Alice to Oswald and back again, and Oswald went on with what he had learned from the printing. The clergyman held the glass at half-arm's length, stiffly, as if he had caught cold. "It is of a quality never before offered at the price. Old Delicate Amoro. What's its name?" "Amarolio," said H.O. "Amoroso," said Oswald. "H.O., you just shut up. Castilian Amoroso. It's a true after-dinner wine, stimulating, and yet—" "Wine?" said Mr. Mallow, holding the glass further off. "Do you know," he went on, making his voice very thick and strong, I expect he does it like that in church, "have you never been taught that it is the drinking of wine and spirits, yes, and beer, which makes half the homes in England full of wretched little children and degraded, miserable parents. Not if you put sugar in it, said Alice firmly. 8 lumps and shake the bottle. We have each had more than a teaspoonful of it, and we were not ill at all. It was something else that upset H.O. Most likely all those acorns he got out of the park. The clergyman seemed to be speechless with conflicting emotions, and just then the door opened and a lady came in. She had a white cap with lace and an ugly violet flower in it, and she was tall and looked very strong, though thin, and I do believe she had been listening at the door. "But why?" the vicar was saying. "Why did you bring this dreadful fluid, this curse of our country, to me to taste?" "Because we thought you might buy some," said Dora, who never sees when a game is up. "In books the parson loves his bottle of old port, and new sherry is just as good, with sugar, for people who like sherry. And if you would order a dozen of the wine, then we should get 2 shillings. The lady said, and it was the voice, "Good gracious, nasty, sordid little things. Haven't they anyone to teach them better?" And Dora got up and said, "No, we are not those things you say. But we are sorry we came here to be called names. We want to make our fortune just as much as Mr. Mallow does. Only no one would listen to us if we preached, so it's no use our copying out sermons like him." And I think that was smart of Dora, even if it was rather rude. Then I said perhaps we had better go, and the lady said, "I should think so." But when we were going to wrap up the bottle and glass, the clergyman said, "No, you can leave that." And we were so upset we did, though it wasn't his after all. We walked home very fast and not saying much, and the girls went up to their rooms. When I went to tell them tea was ready and there was a tea cake, Dora was crying like anything and Alice hugging her. I am afraid there is a great deal of crying in this chapter, but I can't help it. Girls will sometimes. I suppose it is their nature, and we ought to be sorry for their affliction. "It's no good," Dora was saying. "You all hate me, and you think I'm a prig and a busybody, but I do try to do right. Oh, I do. Oswald, go away. Don't come here making fun of me." So I said, "I'm not making fun, Sissy. Don't cry, old girl. Mother taught me to call her Sissy when we were very little and before the others came, but I don't often somehow. Now we are old." I patted her on the back, and she put her head against my sleeve, holding on to Alice all the time, and she went on. She was in that laughy-cry state when people say things they wouldn't say at other times. Oh dear, oh dear. I do try, I do. And when Mother died, she said, "Dora, take care of the others and teach them to be good and keep them out of trouble and make them happy." She said, "Take care of them for me, Dora dear." And I have tried, and all of you hate me for it. And today I let you do this, though I knew all the time it was silly. I hope you will not think I was a muff, but I kissed Dora for some time, because girls like it. And I will never say again that she comes the good elder sister too much. And I have put all this in, though I do hate telling about it, because I own. I have been hard on Dora, but I never will be again. She is a good old sort. Of course, we never knew before about what Mother told her, or we wouldn't have ragged her as we did. We did not tell the little ones, but I got Alice to speak to Dicky, and we 3 can sit on the others if requisite. This made us forget all about the sherry, but about 8 o'clock there was a knock, and Eliza went, and we saw it was poor Jane, if her name was Jane, from the vicarage. She handed in a brown paper parcel and a letter, and 3 minutes later Father called us into his study. On the table was the brown paper parcel, open, with our bottle and glass on it, and Father had a letter in his hand. He pointed to the bottle and sighed and said, "What have you been doing now?" The letter in his hand was covered with little black writing all over the 4 large pages. So Dicky spoke up, and he told Father the whole thing as far as he knew it, for Alice and I had not told about the dead sailor's lady. And when he had done, Alice said, "Has Mr. Mallow written to you to say he will buy a dozen of the sherry after all? It is really not half bad with sugar in it." Father said no, he didn't think clergymen could afford such expensive wine, and he said he would like to taste it. So we gave him what there was left, for we had decided coming home that we would give up trying for the £2 a week in our spare time. Father tasted it, and then he acted just as H.O. had done when he had his teaspoonful, but of course we did not say anything. Then he laughed till I thought he would never stop. I think it was the sherry, because I am sure I have read somewhere about wine that maketh glad the heart of man. He had only a very little, which shows that it was a good after-dinner wine, stimulating, and yet I forget the rest. But when he had done laughing, he said, "It's all right, kids. Only don't do it again. The wine trade is overcrowded. And besides, I thought you promised to consult me before going into business." "Before buying one, I thought you meant," said Dickie. "This was only on commission." And Father laughed again. I am glad we got the Castilian Amoroso, because it did really cheer Father up, and you cannot always do that, however hard you try, even if you make jokes or give him a comic paper.